Thanks. This is my first time in Yale. I did not even know that the color was blue, and now I know so much about the specific blue that it's just, I didn't know I could learn that much about Yale on this trip. So I'm here to talk about using Drupal beyond what you're used to using Drupal as. So I assume everybody here kind of sees Drupal as their CMS, and they're all working with Drupal as their CMS. But in my career as a Drupal developer, I've seen lots of different uses of Drupal, and it occurs to me that not everybody sees it that way. And I would like more people to see it that way. So my name is Jody Hamilton. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called ZivTech that's in Philadelphia. We started 10 years ago, and we're primarily a Drupal development shop. We've grown to also do related services, design, content services like copywriting or helping with marketing strategies and all the different areas that our clients need. But we typically work around Drupal sites, although we dabble in lots of other open source softwares, but our real bread and butter has always been Drupal. So I've been doing Drupal for probably about 13 years, full time. So I drove here. My green Volvo. So I felt, actually, maybe I do fit in here in Connecticut. There were a lot of Volvos. I went to Harvey Mudd College, which is a small school in California. I don't even think we have our own font, or I don't even know what our colors are. You know, we were an engineering school. I majored in chemistry there. I was interested in computer science, but I didn't like the culture of being up all night drinking Mountain Dew and being rude to each other. So I thought, I have too much to deal with already. I can't deal with that right now. I'll just do chemistry. I liked the way they closed the labs at 5 for safety reasons. You couldn't stay there late. I like that. You didn't have to pull any all-nighters. So I went back to Philly after school. There's a lot of pharmaceutical jobs there in Philly and South Jersey. And I worked in that field. I worked for a year as a math teacher, which was a very difficult job. And then I went back to pharmaceuticals again. I absolutely hated it. It was sort of like moving in slow motion. Like everything you did was like, you have to weigh something. So first you have to calibrate the scale. So you get that weight, and then you wait. You know, everything, you did very little actual thinking. It was just all this slow motion stuff. So I started thinking about what kind of field can I get into? I can't afford to go back to school. I already owned a home. And I started thinking about websites. Because I liked that you didn't have to go to school for it. You could teach yourself. And you got to be creative and also logical. So I thought, you know, maybe that would be something I would be good at. I had dabbled in doing some Excel formulas, and I thought I was pretty good at that. So I thought, you know, maybe this is it for me. So brings me to the current day. I've been running this group of developers now for 10 years. I've built all kinds of software projects. Recently, I was on a call with a client, and she was wondering about something she wanted to do with displaying some numbers on her website, and she said really sheepishly, "Can our website do math?" And I just wanted to cry. I just thought, this is where I've come to. You know, the gap between what she thought the website was and what I, as a software engineer, saw the website as was so large that she thought that the website could not do math. I see the website as software running on a computer. There's nothing software likes to do more than math. That's what it's great at. Math is the number one thing that software is good at doing. But she saw it as something else. I think she saw her website, as being something about content editing and displaying of content, which of course it is. But it's also an entire piece of software that runs on a large computer that can process anything. And the fact that she didn't see it that way at all made me realize what a bad job we're doing at explaining what it is that we do for a living. People know, like doctors, they know kind of what they do. They know kind of what lawyers do. They must have no idea what a software developer does if they didn't realize that, we could do math, on the fly, on the page, right? So that made me realize there's so much that we can do for our clients and for all the, millions of people that are not software developers that are doing work. There's so much that we can build for them that would help them, but they have no idea that it would even be easy, that they could even ask for it, because they didn't even realize that the computer could easily solve these problems for them. So they're not even able to ask us for these features. When people talk about wanting to get a new web app, they use these like funny names. I find them funny because most of them don't really mean anything. They'll say, an e-commerce or an intranet, a CRM, a DAM, a CMS, a knowledge base, a portal, a hub, a library, a directory, an ERP, right? These are sort of like names of, like to a vet, these are sort of like names of dog breeds. Like it's somewhat relevant, like what your dog's breed is, but whatever illness it has is like kind of not that relevant to the, they're all kind of the same underneath. And a lot of times people get sort of hung up on, they need a certain piece of software that's specific to their industry. So you're all at a university, so you have to get this university software because it's made for universities. And people don't realize data is just data, right? It's not that different. No one's data is that special. It's all kind of the same stuff. It's basically, it's text, honestly. It's just a bunch of text. Maybe throw some images in there. So I really kind of break all of those systems down into just a few kind of common patterns, at least like from sort of looking at things more as like implementing them on the back end. You've got your forms. Honestly, the only way that people can interact with websites, they can look at them, read them, consume them, they can click things, they can enter something in the URL bar, or they can fill in a form. That's all you got. There's no other things that are going on websites, right? So forms are sort of like where a lot of the complexity is on these websites, because that's the only way to really get information from people other than them just clicking things. And then there's these sort of listing paradigms. You have tables or lists of things, and when you click on something in the list, then you see the full detail version of it, right? Sometimes these lists are filterable or searchable. Event listings are sort of their own subset because you only want to see the upcoming events usually, or maybe you want to put it on a calendar and you want to order them differently than you do with content. Then you might have maps as well. There's usually some third-party integrations involved with some external APIs. You might have to deal with a WYSIWYG, which is sort of like a whole other complicated system. And then you think about data relationships, and then you might get into sort of UI elements. But ultimately, this isn't that long of a list of what web applications actually do, because the browsers are pretty simple. They're not super powerful pieces of software. So ultimately, they just are showing you text and images on the screen. You don't really have that many options. So what is Drupal? So a lot of people say, well, Drupal is a content management system. And so that means basically I add pages, news, and events. I make listings of them. I put them on a calendar. I have relationships between them so I can see other posts that were authored by that person. Very similar to WordPress, except the WYSIWYG's usually not configured as well. But what that is missing is that is just sort of one popular use case of Drupal. What Drupal really is a web development framework, where it sort of has, it's a bit like light. It's a particle and a wave. It's a content management system, but it's also a web development framework that creates a content management system, right? So if you've never been here before, this is api.drupal.org. And this is showing what's really in the framework of Drupal and all of the things that a Drupal developer can use to build new functionality on the framework. And then, of course, below Drupal, and I'm sure there is like an api.wordpress.org, but it kind of like makes developers, in Philly we would say throw up in our mouth. I don't know, Yale, they're fancier. I'm not sure what is the appropriate. It's very, I don't know, what would you say? It's neo-colonial. I don't know. So below this is PHP, which is a complete programming language, which you can use to build anything you want, right? And here I'm just happen to be on the math page to just showing you that, yes, it does do math, just like any other programming language. So with these tools, you can use Drupal as a very nice web application framework, whether you want to make a very customized content management system or something that you might call something else, a CRM, an ERP, an intranet, e-commerce system, whatever it is you want to call it, or you can have features from those different things as just part of your site, however you need them. So I'm going to kind of take you through some of the projects that I've worked on that to help you kind of see the range of different use cases. That I'm going to skip all the projects that I've done that are the more typical. I've done lots of projects for universities where it's, the informational sites, and lots of projects for corporations, nonprofits, everyone trying to get out their message, put out their news, their press releases, their upcoming events. I've done lots of these, but today I'm going to talk about the ones that are not that way. So the first project, first really large project that I worked on after I started ZivTech, actually started in Drupal 5, but we migrated to Drupal 6 at some point. It was called Flat World Knowledge. And they were a startup. They're a more established company now. And their idea was that they wanted to be a textbook publishing company that would publish the books online so that the books would be much more affordable to students and also customizable by the professors. So that you could have like various formats for the books. So you could just read them online for free, or you could download PDFs of specific chapters and print those out and pay like $2 a chapter or something. Or you could order a bound book, but it would still be much less than like a normal textbook. And for the professors that adopt these textbooks, They could, instead of giving you a syllabus that says, we're going to do this chapter and then skip this chapter and then go back and do this chapter, they could customize the textbook and rearrange the order of the chapters and delete chunks of it so that you didn't end up with this huge book when you were only using part of it. They could even kind of add in like assignments and notes into the book. So we did that all in Drupal. We had the ability for students to read these books online. We had the ability for the professors to come in and edit the books to make their own customized versions. And then craziest of all, and we had an e-commerce system, of course, where you could buy all sorts of different variations of it. But the craziest of all was that we had to, as part of customizing these books, we had to then convert the output to HTML as well as DocBook XML for it to go to the publisher, as well as the PDF formats, and that to all happen automatically, right? So the content there was sort of the actual chapters of the textbooks. But it was very, they're doing very well now. They eventually had to get their own tech team in order to get the next round of funding. So we're not with them anymore, unfortunately. Then another big project that we worked on, that we still work on, is the Fruit Guys, which I wish they would change to Fruit Folks. But they actually, I don't know if anyone gets their fruit. They deliver fruit mainly to offices. So every Monday we get a box of seasonal fruit for the office. That's kind of the main side of their business. They also deliver fruit to schools and other things like that. But it's actually, it sounds simple enough, delivering fruit to offices. But it's actually incredibly complicated to source and distribute fruit, because you can't predict how much of it you're going to be getting. It goes bad. The prices change. There's just a lot of like varying factors that go on. There's a lot of refunds that happen when people their fruit is no good when they get it. And you also have to distribute it very quickly, obviously, because it's fresh fruit. There's a lot of logistics there. So we've done lots of work with them. A big thing that we did was sort of a lot of customer service tools, so that their website does e-commerce where people can put in these special orders that are on a schedule, but people have to say, oh, well, our office is closed for this holiday, so don't come that day, or we want to change this, or we're getting too many bananas. There's all kinds of like customer support requests that they get. So we built them a whole system within their Drupal 6 site that was integrated with their e-commerce system, so that they could give refunds, they could put in customer notes, they could look up all the interactions they'd had with the customer. Their delivery people could access information like where they need to drop it off, or if there's a holiday. We also built a whole system that takes all of their orders and then prints out labels that go on the boxes, so that they have all the right information on the boxes when the people go and deliver the boxes. And that was mostly kind of all hubbed around Drupal, because they already had Drupal as their e-commerce system. There was some different software for the printing things to the printer and things like that. Then about 5 years ago, I did a project for my friend Matt Cheney, who's another one of the owners of Pantheon. The Pantheon owners, like Josh, who talked earlier, they also own a bicycle company. And you can, at this bicycle company, you can go in there and you can pick all of these custom parts and get a custom bike. So they wanted to bring that to the web. So we made this custom bike builder integrated with the e-commerce all in Drupal 7. So it's really a lot of fun, because you can go in here and pick your different colors of different things. And my big thing is I'm obsessed with URLs. I think that the greatest thing about the web is consistent URL. So you'll notice every time I click something, the URL changes. So every time I can grab this URL, I can send it to someone else, they could come here and see the same bike. I don't have to save anything in the database. It's just all in the URL. So they can just kind of come back and get it again. So here I can add some different things. Oh, change my handlebars. And then it updates the price the whole time. You know why? Because websites can do math. And change the background there. Send it on Facebook and order it up, right? So what's the content there? I thought this was a CMS. The content is sort of all these parts of the bike. And they have these different attributes of these different colors and things like that. Although it has some more traditional content. There's this shop, and each product is like a piece of content. Here's a listing page that's filterable and has detail pages, as websites do. We have a blog with some normal content. Then this is an interesting project. This was about, say, three years ago. This is a Drupal 7 project. This is actually a legal printing company. I love these projects because you learn all about these different industries, right? Because you have to learn all their terminology so that you use the same types of terminology that they do all the way through the system. Otherwise, confusion results. So what I learned here is that court reporters, which is sort of the proper name for stenographers, go to these legal depositions and they have to type up everything that the deponent says. So the deponent is someone that they're questioning in court, and they're typing up like these huge depositions, and it ends up being like 40 pages because they're asking someone questions for a couple hours. And then they have to take those written depositions. They probably go through and make sure they don't have any typos and things like that. But then ultimately they have to get copies of this to all of the lawyers involved. And so there's this whole industry of court reporting printing. And within cities, these printing companies are the types of people that use those like bicycle messengers, because they have to get these reports out to the lawyers, and everybody's right downtown anyway, right? So the way they were conducting their business was that the court reporters would email them with their files, which are really just text files. They're just like ASCII text files. Then they would email them back, and they would say, oh, did you forget to include some of the exhibits? They may have some like images that are some exhibits that somebody brought. And then they'll say, no, I don't have a digital version of it. I have to send it in with a courier. And then they would email back and forth, and they would try to figure out what the price was going to be for the printing and the shipping of it, because they print it out on these kind of longer than normal pages. You guys know what lawyers are like. Their papers are too long, and then they send it off by FedEx or the courier to get it to the right attorneys, and they have to. A lot of times, someone has to sign for it to prove that it went to the right place. So they're doing this all back and forth by email, and then when they finally finish the job, then they're going to have to send them a bill, also by email, I suppose, and then wait and see if they get a check back in, and then probably like update some spreadsheet somewhere and hope nothing got lost in the shuffle. And they've got, who knows how many of these coming in every day, and all this back and forth. And there's so many opportunities for things to fall through the cracks, and so much inefficiency there. So you can see where this is going. Obviously, we could automate most of this, right? So luckily, they had the idea, hey, like maybe what we need is a web app. Right? With a web app, instead of them just emailing us, they could just log on to our website, we could make sure they filled in all the right information because it'll validate the form. Give them all the options that we most of the time don't even have time to tell them about because we have lots of options and like we can't email them about them all the time. And then we can also sort of manage our production line in there and make sure that we didn't forget to print something or forget to ship something, and everybody can kind of work at their station and see how things are coming through. We can even have like their credit cards on file through a third-party system so that they can just kind of check out automatically, and now we're getting the money like right away instead of us like sending them an invoice later and us just waiting, right? So this is a little bit, I can't show you too much here because it's like people's legal stuff, so I can't really like click around too much. I think this is why people don't do a lot of talks about these kinds of applications, because you really can't show a lot of it because it's like private. A lot of the internet, like you think of the internet and it's like this big public amount of information, but most of the internet is probably like locked away, private content that you're not able to see. So you can see this one, it's test versus test. So we just tried to make everything very clear so everyone could understand what's going on. This job is complete. It's job number 261. It's test versus test. They've got a dark blue binder. Then we have the deponents. Each deponent has its own transcript, and it can have exhibits. Then we have recipients. Each of the court reporters, it automatically creates a library, an address book of of the attorneys that they send things to. So if you send it to an attorney once, it'll let you sort of pre-populate as you type the next time, so that you don't have to type in the whole thing again and mess up the address. So you send it to the attorneys. Then this is really for the workers. Since I'm an admin here, I can see everything. I made a FedEx integration so they can automatically just go print out a FedEx label to the right address with all the info there to each of these recipients. And then we also have a repository. So for those, which I can only show you, again, the same case, but it's a searchable repository. So those attorneys who are willing to go to a website instead of a filing cabinet, they can find all of these depositions right here, and they can search for them. So it's a lot better system for them, and hopefully eventually save some paper. So they're starting to have more customers. I guess the laws vary on whether you have to have paper versions, but they're starting to have more customers that do the electronic only. And when they do electronic only, that's almost no expense to them whatsoever, because the whole system's automated then, right? No one's doing any work then. And so what we're doing for them now is we're making them an API so that other printing companies can automatically send their information into here and have them do their jobs as well. So this was a pretty good idea for them, as opposed to doing it all by email. This is a more typical type of a web application. It's just a kind of a normal intranet. And we also, for a long time, ran our company intranet on Drupal. It's really easy to run an intranet on Drupal. All you do is you go to kind of the people permissions and change who's allowed to access content to just logged in users, right? Now you have to log in to use the site. Now it's kind of an intranet, right? So Drupal works really well as an intranet. It has great access control. Interesting thing about this project was this is a corporation that they do e-commerce. They had been sold to eBay, and their name became eBay Enterprise. And then eBay decided they didn't want them and sent them back off. So then they had to come up with a new name, and they were also very squeezed for money at that point. They had been paying $100,000 a year for their intranet, for a software as a service intranet, which I thought was really interesting because usually when you think of software as a service, you think it's going to be less expensive. And the whole reason to use it is that it's going to be so much less expensive than having something custom. And I was like, well, I can build you the same intranet you already have for less than $100,000 as a one-time payment and add all these other features that you can't have, that you would like to have. So that was a pretty good deal for them. Since they were already using Drupal internally for like their marketing site, they could put it on the same server and have the same people do the updates, security updates, and already kind of know how to use Drupal. Even the marketing people who do updates on their site can do updates on their intranet as well. It's kind of the same system. So what we did, some of the nice features here that I cannot show you because I don't want to ruin anyone's privacy, but we made a really nice people search so that if you kind of like knew someone's name, like you kind of knew their first name maybe, you could find them. And you can kind of look by what office they work in or what department. And it also brings up this org chart where you can navigate through the org chart, because a lot of people there were saying they had a hard time figuring out who to email about certain things because they're going through so much flux with so much turnover. They don't even know, like, who is that person's boss if they're not doing their work and I need to take it up a level? Or who is in charge of marketing? And then they could do that all through the org chart. And then we also added a seating chart so they could actually find the people and see exactly where they sit. And that's all as like an SVG, so they can like update the data and the seating chart changes. They don't have to like redraw it or anything like that. So yeah, I think Drupal really makes a nice intranet if you are in need of an intranet. This is a project, sorry, this is kind of overlapping here. Okay, this Aaron Copland Fund for Music, they are a foundation, obviously started by Aaron Copland, who's an American classical composer. And they give out a lot of grants to American musicians and composers and orchestras. And the way that they were handling this previously was that people were sending by mail these applications that were like this much paper, and then like a CD of their music as well. Then they would take these stacks of paper and then they would copy them, 50 times, and then send them out to all of their panelists to review, right? This was so much paper and so much copying. I think that part of their office actually collapsed because of the weight of the paper. Also, they had like some kind of like a fire or a flood that like destroyed like all of their old paper. So it was pretty crazy. So they wanted to obviously do this all online so people could just apply online, and then their panelists could come in and see all of the applications. So they looked around at different software as a service options, but none of them really were flexible enough to meet their exact workflow that they wanted. So they hired us to build them a custom web application, which we originally did in Drupal 6 in like 2009. And then they liked so much, they rehired us to redo it in Drupal 8. And over time, when they would go talk to their Music Foundation buddies, they brought in more and more foundations that we were also running on basically the same system. So we were running all these different music foundations and other types of foundations as well. And so we ended up making a whole like software as a service product out of it. And so it's now based in Drupal 8. So it's called grantcycle.io. And it's all about letting people apply for your grants, but allowing the foundation themselves to customize the applications, because that's the big challenge with these applications, is that they always want to change the forms a little bit from year to year. But they also don't want to screw up the old data when they do that, because they want to be able to look at the old data. So we built this whole system, lets them have these applications. They can also review and score them, assign them to different panelists. They have different grant cycles that have different applications. And here's their site. So yeah, you can do the whole thing as an applicant. But what's really fun, I think, is you can search all of the old applications. So if you just wanted to hear something by Bach, you can see anybody that ever, let's get someone who is not denied. Okay, don't look at any of that confidential information. There, see? Now I'm a panelist, and I'm right here listening to it. No CDs. And we also have like a PDF generator that takes everything that's in these applications, all the PDFs that are attached, and puts it all together so they can review it offline, I guess. And then here's where they go to score the applications. So the content here is actually the applications. But when you go to, this kind of drives me crazy. I want it to go over here. You're used to going to content and then going to add content. You don't see applications here. You see FAQs, news, things that you're used to seeing. But one of the big themes with these types of sites that are not really typical content sites is we don't usually just use Drupal nodes to run the content. We usually use custom entities, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. But Drupal has a system of allowing you to have all different types of entities. They don't have to just be content, but they all have the same powers, where you can add fields, and you can add the same types of fields, and you can decide how they're displayed, and you can make views with them. They all kind of have the same high-level powers there. This is just a sample version of the grant system, so you can kind of see what an application would look like there. Okay, so here's another project, a little bit more like normal content. But again, see, I logged into these so you would know I wasn't making this up. This is also a Drupal site, right? This is a timeline site. This is actually my family history. I like to immerse myself in my projects, I would say. So this is actually my grandmom, and here she is during World War II as a welder. And finally, I'm born here, and here we are. So the content here are actually these images, but the way we're displaying them is in this timeline. And what's great about this is you can go to see a global timeline of everybody's photos. That's my sister in 1970. And you can go to any year you want, or you can search. I like to search for City Hall. So this is actually where I work, this like window right here. But this is 1931. But I'm still in the same building. Actually, yeah, It's like over here. So, yeah, so this is, I mean, this is a bit more what you think about as content, because it has the image and then it has like this sort of content that goes with it. But you don't have to, you know, and if you go to like certain parts of the site, like tutorials, it's a bit more like you're used to, you know, just sort of more of a normal Drupal content site. Okay, this is the last one that I'll show you. This is a pretty normal content informational site. This is a nonprofit that, I don't know if you can read that here, the campaign to prevent unplanned pregnancy. So most of the content here, this is a Drupal 8 site, so it's the last one. This is mostly normal Drupal content here, just nodes. So this homepage here is just a node, so I can go to node 1 edit, and you can see I'm using paragraphs module to make a carousel, an email sign up, all of these sort of different items here. I'm choosing my header. This one doesn't have a header image. But it also has some sections that are a little bit more like custom web applications. So one section is here, national and state data. So here they wanted to show all of this different data that they have to update pretty regularly. And they have national data. They also have data for each state here. And they have some comparisons as well. So we can see who's better. Connecticut, which has got to be one of these. This, maybe? Yes. And Pennsylvania, okay, guys. Probably lighter is better. Just based on what's going on over here. Yeah, so we obviously have to generate this map when the data changes and all of this. So what we did here is, even though we have most of the things on the site are these normal things you're used to, articles, we made a new entity type, which is, where do I find that? PTD statistic type. And it has different bundles. Just like nodes have different bundles, but we call them content types. This has different bundles. So we have county costs is one bundle, a national statistic is another bundle. And for each one, it has fields. Here's the fields that I added. You can change the form display, etc. But then what I did was I made them a custom interface for these. So they would, because there's a lot of stuff here. So state costs. Actually, let me go to state statistics. Okay. So just kind of use normal interface elements like tabs and put in forms and things. So instead of them having to put in each statistic, like you're putting in a node, make one node, make another node, I made them this, what looks more like a spreadsheet. And then I put in some JavaScript so they could actually take their data that they already had in Excel, because they're kind of gathering it in Excel anyway, that's where they like to work, and they could copy whole rows of it, and it'll paste it straight into all these rows. If you edit anything, it turns red, so you can, check before you hit save that you didn't make any accidental changes here, because there's just so much data. And that's how you put in your state statistics. And the thing about this kind of stuff is this is easy, because you don't even need a designer or any CSS or worry about your font is too heavy at the bottom. None of that. Like this is actually really easy stuff. But people tend to think like this is so hard, like we can't have this feature on our website because this is too custom, this is too hard. But it's actually simple. This is what websites are great at. This is software, right? Not Not a problem at all. So what is Drupal? To come back here. So I would really call it a web application data framework. It's very focused on how it interacts with the database and dealing with data and data relationships. So content is one type of data. It's a very popular type. And when people think of content, they usually think of blog posts and pages and paragraphs and copy. But it could really be anything. It could really be numbers or images or labels that go on a box, or all kinds of different things. So I showed you a little bit of how Drupal is not just about nodes, even though that's sort of what it does out of the box. It's very easy to extend it from there. So yes, basically, your website can do math. You can, if you have something that you would like to automate, that's something that you want to share with a lot of people so they get the up-to-date version of it and communicate in real time, your website is great at that. And it doesn't have to be just for external content that you're sharing. It can be all kinds of information. But you need to kind of think about what really makes sense to do as a custom part of your website, or even as a whole separate little Drupal site you can spin up on Pantheon, versus what you could do with software as a service, or what you should just continue doing the way you are doing because it's just not worth the effort of automating it. So when I think about where most of us as sort of like white-collar office workers, where we actually work, it's really moved from desktop software to the web for most of us, right? So if I just look at, if I can get this out of full screen mode, enter full screen? No. Here, if I just look at my tabs, I close most of them, but here's my Gmail. I work in there all day. It's a web application. And here's my Pantheon dashboard, so I can give my friends at Pantheon a promotion. And that's another like software as a service web application. I work in all these web applications all day long. Most of them are not bespoke custom systems. Most of them are software as a service. I'm using, these right here, these are Google Slides, right? That's software as a service. I'm using Slack. I'm using Jira for my project management. So I'm in software as a service like all day long. The time to get into bespoke software, like I've been showing you all these different projects, is when your needs are too custom. A lot of these things that I was showing you, like the court reporting system, there's nothing out there, software as a service, that did exactly what they needed it to do, right? And to try to make it work wouldn't have been worth it. They would have had to fill in too many of the gaps. So that's the recent thing that like really does need to be that custom, and you have to do your research, make sure there isn't something already out there that could be a lot less money than having something done custom. Or in some cases, because you are so, not to keep harping on this, but if you're so fussy about your fonts and your colors, some universities are apparently, you might not be able to customize your software as a service to your standards of your branding, right? So that's another reason you might want to do something custom. Or maybe you're using, you just have a lot of data, or maybe the pricing is just not going to work or whatever. But in general, software as a service is doing really, really well. It's solving lots of different needs. But yes, there's definitely times when, all of you are using these CMSs that are sort of in between software as a service and bespoke, right? You're kind of creating your own service, but there are bespoke elements to it, right? So one of the ways I think that people can identify what might be a useful feature for a web application for their organization is to start thinking about the kind of data that they're working with a lot in their spreadsheets, in their emails, in their other types of documents. So I did this as an experiment to just search my Google Drive to see what kinds of spreadsheets I had recently had access to. And you probably can't see that, but as a business owner, they're mostly about money. There are all kinds of like estimates and invoices, and this one's a over-under document on budgets, allocations of who's working on what. That's not so much about money. This one's an editorial calendar, a budget template, right? So if I kind of looked at that, my analysis would be, it kind of seems like maybe we should consider using some kind of software as a service for making our budgets and estimates, right? Because that's what a lot of these are. And it's really easy to mess up in the spreadsheets with the calculations because you add another row and then it didn't change the calculation right. Now we're sending someone the wrong estimate, and we're constantly having to like have 3 people check the math before we send out the estimates. In our case, I don't think we're a big enough company to like make a huge project out of it. The bigger your organization, the more it kind of makes sense to get into these projects that add efficiency like that. So yeah, I already talked about that. Anyway, let's have some drinks and hopefully get some creative ideas for using Drupal in all kinds of different ways. Thanks. Questions?